we're talking to the Young family, and Harry Young in 1962, right up here is where no-till got started in Herndon, Kentucky, on 7/10 of an acre. I've been to the farm a number of times, probably a half dozen times over the years. John is Harry's son, Alex is his grandson, and Jared, did I get it right, would be his great-grandson. So we got 3 generations here. Tell me, you were around when this was happening in 62, weren't you?
Yeah.
How old were you in 62?
I was 11 years old.
Were you the guy that wanted to go out and work all the dirt and plow it and disc it?
You know, at that time, Frank, we had a hoe in our hand and a tobacco patch to go and work in. It was a beef cattle and tobacco area in southwestern Kentucky until no-tillage came in. And we're now part of the southern end of the corn belt or the bean belt.
Right, exactly.
Because of no-tillage. So I was there. I cared a lot more about other things at the time, unfortunately, at 11 years old. Yeah. But no-tillage has tremendously changed the way agriculture is, not only there, but around the world.
Right. Well, one of the things that really opened up people's eyes about your dad was when they talked about harvesting 1,800 acres a year, but only having 1,200 acres.
It's a tremendous thing, double cropping, and there's a belt that goes from Kansas through Missouri, southern Illinois, Kentucky, into Delmarva area. Wheat and double crop soybeans has been a tremendous help, and that's the way you get that extra acreage off of a land acre. If you do corn followed by wheat followed by soybeans, then you can increase your crop acres by 50%. Well, 33%, I guess it is.
So I suppose it's getting a little scary now, no-tilling, with Alex coming around and looking at all the figures and the GPS and the auto steering and everything else. What's it going to be when he's here? He's going to get Alex scared with everything that will be new.
So many changes. Al has been a tremendous asset with computers and GPS and the high technology, and that's the future of farming, I believe, Frank.
Yeah. I've stood down there, and here's the sign up there that shows the field where it first started. That sign got lost for a few years, didn't it?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. Some high school kid thought it would be really cute to come and take a historical marker, and it was gone for a while, and we didn't know where it was until the family moved away from their home, and they found it in the back of the garage. Well, there were no charges pressed, but at least it got put back in place.
Yeah.
So it was good to have it back.
Yeah. I remember an editor I used to work with, John Harvey, went to DuPont, and he was the one that pretty much got that sign put up. So Alex, what's happening? How's it getting along with the old man on the farms? You got to work.
The old man, I would comment on that. You made the comment on technology, and Dad has actually pushed me more into the new technologies than vice versa.
Yeah.
I think it's that cutting edge spirit, maybe, but. Anyway, he said, well, why don't we try this software, and why don't we try this GPS innovation? And it's been fantastic.
Yeah.
As we spoke yesterday, we're really putting a lot of that into play. And Jared's coming along into it. He's got 3 drones now that he can take up and fly around. Yeah. And anyway, we're making progress, I think.
We have a drone that Jeff here runs and use it in the company. Jeff's also lost one of his drones. He's never been able to find it. So. Interesting what you said. 4 or 5 years ago, we had a father-son combination that had come to this conference for 3 or 4 years. And the father said to me, "This is my last conference. I'm not coming anymore." And I said, "How come?" He said, "I finally convinced my son to get into GPS and get into no-till. It's usually the other way around."
It's like putting the hoe in the hand of a youngster, except instead of the tool being a hoe, it's a computer.
Right, exactly.
And as long as I can say, "Al, take that and figure it out," he takes it and figures it out, and that gives us the profitability from it.
Right, that's kind of what I do in the office, and if I have a problem, I don't try to fix it myself, I take it to someone else.
By the way, Frank, while we have this opportunity, let me say that you and your publishing company and No-Till Magazine have been probably one of the preeminent tools to advance agriculture in this country and around the world. It is a tremendous asset, and I congratulate you on that.
Well, thank you. It's a team effort. We got 40 people, and everybody gets involved in this, but I really feel great when people say, "You have made me a lot of money."
Yes, sir.
And I sometimes say, "I don't know anything, I just trade ideas from," I listen well and trade ideas.
By the way, on that around the world idea, we have a friend in Argentina who traveled up all the way from Argentina to Herndon. His dad was elderly at the time, but he just wanted to see the place where no-till had started. He came up to the sign, the historical marker, and he did like this. So your spreading the word around the world has had tremendous effects.
Thank you. So we're talking to Dave Sutherland, Leroy, Kansas, runs about 2,400 acres. How many of the no-till conferences have you been to?
Well, I was thinking it was 20, but I'm not sure. I lost track there. So it's right around that.
Right.
You know, maybe 18 to 20.
He's brought his dad with him to a number of this. Tell
Until
us,
this one, right. This is
Okay.
the first one he's missed.
Good.
So.
You up in this picture?
That's me when I was 7 years old.
Okay.
And I didn't know this picture existed. This was every year the local newspaper would send out a photographer of the first combine to run the crop of the year, right? So we had early maturing varieties, and it was usually us on the front page of the paper, and that's what this picture was. I think that came from my sister because I don't have that picture, but they would send out a photographer, first wheat field cut, first bean field cut, you know.
So you guys, your dad started no-tilling in the late 60s, and you've gone on. You added cover crops in the late 80s. What's cover crops done for your operation?
Cover crops has changed everything. You know, it's we should have just did cover crops from the start. But yeah, a lot of black clay that we have, it's made those fields completely different. Increased yields on them 50% just by having covers and breaking up that soil, you know. And now I'm growing some sun hemp and vetch and different things, growing nitrogen too, and raising some standard yield corn with just grown nitrogen, no applied nitrogen on lower yield fields.
Right. So we're talking with Phil Needham from Needham Ag Technologies in Kentucky. Phil came over from England, correct me if I'm wrong, came over from England to work on high yield wheat program to start with, right? Mm-hmm. And what did you learn about no-till when you got here?
So I was brought to this country by a large ag retailer in Kentucky and surrounding states, and came to this country in the late 1980s to help expand the European crop management system. And there wasn't a lot of no-till wheat back then, Frank.
Right.
There was some, but not very much. There was a lot of challenges with no-till wheat. Some of the equipment wasn't really configured or set up to be able to no-till wheat successfully. Some of the residue wasn't spread very well. So a combination of residue not being spread very well and some of the seeding equipment not configured very well, in addition to some varieties that needed some work from a point of view of fusarium tolerance, there wasn't a lot of no-till wheat.
Yeah, I think Phil has gone off on his own, started a company with some attachments, some technology, some consulting ideas, but I think the major contribution you've made to here is residue management and preaching to get the residue spread the whole width of the combine.
That's definitely right, and I've done a lot of work trying to encourage some of the manufacturers and helping farmers understand what modifications are required to do a better job. There's a lot of little things that add up to make a big difference when it comes to residue spreading. Some of the things you can modify the choppers and the spreaders at the back of the combine to do a better job, or it may just be as simple as figuring out how wide the combine spreads. If the combine spreads 35 feet with all the modifications available, there's no point putting a 40-foot or a 45-foot head on the front, because you're going to have 5 or 10 foot or more without any residue on it, and that's going to be a problem. So selecting the correct head for the width of the spread at the back of the combine is pretty important.
So Phil has been named one of our no-till legends, but I think that you're really a believer that a no-till program doesn't start in the spring, it starts in the fall at harvest time.
It absolutely starts in the fall, Frank. It starts with getting the combine set up and configured, then it begins with setting up the seeding equipment with proper ballast, sharp disc blades, the attachments that are required to do a better job. And that's really where it starts. And we did a lot actually, of cooperative work with the University of Kentucky, Lloyd Murdoch down there, and basically started doing field scale trials where we compared conventional tillage to no tillage in replicated trials, multiple locations, multiple years. And I think over 3 or 5 years, 5 or 7 locations per year, so lots of independent replicated studies, the yields of the convention and the no-till were within a bushel. So that results in a lot of cost savings to the grower from a tillage perspective, but guys that are still working their ground for wheat, there's still a lot of soil erosion. If you start looking at these no-till fields with lots of residue cover, there's virtually no soil loss off those fields. When you get a big 2, 3, 4-inch rain, a lot of clean water running off them fields, Frank, compared to just mud on the worked fields. And that's huge.
So we're talking with Ray McCormick from Vincennes, Indiana. 1993, he was a speaker at our first no-tillage conference. He's back here in 2017. A lot of changes in your no-till over the years?
Has been, but it's still a good experience, but we're just opening the door, and all this innovation is mind-boggling. It's exciting, period.
Ray's to the point where he's seeding his cover crops with a unit that mounts on the front of his combine corn head. That's worked very well for you?
It's been tremendous in my area to be able to get that cover crop on as you're harvesting. Cuts down on fuel, labor, wear and tear on my machinery. To be able to pull out of the field and have your cover crop on, and then it starts raining, it all comes up. It's really been an efficiency factor. So we're putting on cover crop on every acre every year.
I sat in your classroom session on cover crops yesterday, and the most impressive thing I got out of it was not so much about seeding cover crops, how you did it. Most impressive thing to me was you took a guy that wasn't sitting on a drill all day, and you found out something else to do him, and the tremendous savings you had just in labor costs.
Well, that's my son.
Yeah.
And when we were drilling, I said, this cover crop is so important, we'll make the sacrifice to have him on a drill all day long putting on cover crops. But now we've freed him up.
Yeah.
He's helping with driving the semis, running the dryer, and so forth. So we essentially have eliminated the use of a tractor, a drill, and my valuable son during harvest.
Right.
So it's been really an efficiency factor. It's been a real good thing for farmers to look at.
A couple of years ago, I think you told me that there were farmers selling crop residue for ethanol. And I think you told me that you wouldn't sell your residue for $100 an acre.
You know, there's farmers selling straw for the coal mining reclamation business, but also we've looked at the using the residue, and you know, you got to put dollars and cents on that, and we all know that our fertilizer input costs have really got high. They've come down a little, but it's very high.
Right.
You have to put that calculation in there. How much phosphorus, potash, nitrogen, carbon, the value of the carbon on our soils, and that residue, feeding that soil health system, that's worth a lot of money to us. So I don't want it going down the road. I want it to go into my soil resource.
One of the other things that Ray has, corn and soybeans in southern Indiana. He's got high groundy farms, he's got river groundy farms. A couple cash crops he has is deer hunting and duck hunters. You bring duck hunters into you, and there's some benefits to no-till for duck hunters, right?
Absolutely. Soil health, no-till. My phone's abuzz right now, Frank. They're all wanting to know it's thawing out.
Yeah.
Are we going tomorrow? You know, so it's fun.
Yeah.
But it's an economic income source on my farm. But generally, to build soil health helps all the resources, whether it's the whooping cranes a visit, or a mallard duck, or a white-tailed deer, or a microbe down in the soil. When you build a healthy environment, just like in our own bodies, it builds up your farm. That wildlife makes it something to be very proud of.
Right. Yeah, Ray, what's your best memory of no-till, coming to the conferences or reading the magazine or whatever?
Well, that's a hard question. I don't know. I guess my best memory is just my first, my first exposure to so many like-minded people.
Yeah.
You know, the personalities, the innovation, the willingness to take risk. All these people to be in the same room with them or in the same building with them. It was really a jaw-dropping experience just to find all these people from around the U.S. and around the world that share these common interests with you. That generally has been what is so profound about coming.
Super, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, here's Ed Neeson from Rogers, Nebraska, and he's been to a number of the no-till conferences over the years. How many have you been to?
23, I believe.
So you've missed 2 over the years. What's it meant to you? And your wife came with you to a number of conferences.
She come to probably 15 or so, and she runs the sprayer, and she's a big part of the farm. And she's she's a no-till fan.
Right.
And because when we started, we didn't have much for machinery.
Right.
And we thought no-till just seemed to fit right in. And we're from east central Nebraska. And the moisture saving is,
Sure.
we do irrigate some.
Right.
But that costs money that it just makes so much sense that if you could save a 3/4 inch of water here or there, that amounts to money. And we got into buying some land, so that kind of really put a crimp on buying
Right.
machinery. And I always felt, well, I'd be better off with 80 acres of land, or an extra 80 acres of land, than a shiny new tractor.
Right.
And I guess, I don't know.
We're talking with John McNabb, who's a big-time no-tiller, has been for years, from Income, Idaho. What's the most no-till you ever did in 1 year?
43,000.
That's what I thought.
acres.
43,000 acres of no-till. You're not that big anymore. You've
No.
cut back some. But what's no-till done to you over the years?
Well, it's a whole new ball game. I wished I was doing it when I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
But it's been it's made the soil's been better. It's been less expensive to farm. It's instead of cropping every other year, but we get better yields every year.
Right. I remember once talking to Guy Swanson from Exactrix, and he told me sometime in May you were seeding up high in the hills and looking down on a ski resort where they were still skiing.
We're up by the ski area.
Yeah. How high elevation would you farm?
5,500 feet.
Okay.
Average.
Steep slopes?
Yes.
Right. And you ran a yielder drill for years, right?
Yes.
The old one, and some of those fully loaded would weigh 25 tons, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they were heavy.
Yeah. So what do you seed with now?
We have a set of John Deere 752s, 30 feet, and a Concord case, 48 foot,
Right.
12-inch centers with a 4-inch shovel with split
Yeah. We're standing here.
paired row.
We're standing here in front of a sign, and here's a 2,000-acre no-till field up here, and then we talk a little about one way up in northern Alberta that could go as high as 14,000. What's the biggest field you ever no-till?
Well, 10,000 acre field.
Did you? Wow. And you mentioned paired rows. Tell us a little about paired rows. Kind of like twin rows in the Midwest.
Yes. Paired row, it puts when you put fertilizer down between those two, and so those two rows feed off of that, and then anything out in your dead area where the weeds might come,
Right.
the weeds don't have any fertility.
There you go.
They only fertilize the crop.
And those paired rows would be how far apart?
5 inches.
5 inches, and fertilizer right in the center.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, we're talking with Steve and David Groff from Holtward, Pennsylvania. Steve's been coming to the conference since the mid-'90s. Really got an interesting, diversified no-till operation. Tell us some of the crops that you raise. Tomatoes? No-till tomatoes?
We used to have no-till tomatoes. Now they're all in high tunnels, and we
Okay.
switched that way to have better quality and so forth. But we have 35 acres of no-till pumpkins and squash, and corn, soybeans, and several different small grains, trying oilseed rape this year. And a lot of that is in the context, though, of cover crop research. So all our crops have some sort of cover crop research involved with them.
So what's David doing in the operation?
I do a lot of the driving of the tractor and figuring out test plots and kind of doing the mechanical workings more so.
So you have to figure out how to do your dad's crazy ideas?
Yeah.
Well, he's
I
a
come up
strong.
with some of my own too.
Right.
He's a good supporter too.
Well, you've been a big booster of cover crops. I can remember as a kid, my dad was seeding cover crops in the late 40s, and we tended to get away from it.
Yeah.
Now we're back.
Right. Same with my dad. He remembers sitting on the front of a farm-all tractor, spinning on annual ryegrass at last cultivation.
Okay.
So we
Interseeding.
it was the precursor to what we call interseeding today.
Yeah.
But now here we are, there's like a 40 or 50 year gap. Now we're back into using cover crops in the
Right.
context of modern technology.
So you've really been big into cover crops, and Mike Plummer was talking last night about with low commodity prices, maybe we can't afford all these mixtures that we
Okay.
had.
Well, I think it's causing us to sharpen our pencils a little bit
Right.
more too, but it also comes down to what you're trying to accomplish. Especially with mixes, a lot of times we can get away with lower seeding rates, especially if we're not involving forages. But the point is with cover crops, one of the basic fundamental points is to have something growing in the soil. And sometimes we don't need to have as many plants or as many
Right.
seeds as you may think.
Right. Well, some of the research that Marion Commerce done on soybean rates,
Mm-hmm.
at 75,000 plants per acre, you can't see any yield difference to 200,000.
Yeah, and you can apply that same principle
Yeah.
to some of the cover crops, some of the ones that can branch out more and fill in. So, yeah, I think the low commodity prices is causing us to relook at some things, but I would suggest simply lowering rates, getting in the seeds in the ground in a way, essentially treating your cover crops like your cash crops.
Right. Speaking of cash crops, one of the fascinating things I think you've done is gone to short season corn
Yes.
hybrids to get your cover crops a longer growing
Correct.
season without any impact on yield.
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, short season genetics, we all agree, have been proved. Finding the one that is, or a few of them that is good in your area is that next step, because not just because it's short season doesn't mean it's good. What we have found, though, is short season genetics will probably work better in your poorer soils, tend to be, because they're the ones that tend to run out of moisture or whatever late summer, and you just don't get the benefit of longer season. So planting 5 to 10% of your acreage in a short season corn seems to be taking hold more and more, so you can get your cover crops planted 2 to 3 weeks earlier. And then I've done the research for the second year. We plant one hybrid across the plot, and we're getting 7 to 8 bushels more because we had that cover crop planted 2 to 3 weeks earlier. So in spite of a little yield hit you may take, you may gain it up the following year.
So David, you came to the No-Till Conference, you've been here 4 times, you came when you were 16 years old.
Yes, sir.
Give us a couple of impressions you've learned from the No-Till Conference.
Well, I've appreciated a lot of the experience in the crowd, more so than a lot of the speakers. But I've learned a lot, both from interacting with the people in the hallways and from the speakers. There's a lot of information that I didn't learn before or can't learn at home from elsewhere in the county, and I learned how other people farm, and it's kind of interesting to figure out other normal farmers, you could say, and how they're making it work in larger scale than our home farm.
So David, give us one of the best ideas you've gotten from your dad, or one he's tried to jam down your throat or something like that.
Well, let's see. There's quite a few, but if I'd point to one, I think there's an overall arching thing of, you don't have to be afraid to try anything. If just try it, really.
Yeah.
If you have something you want to try, he's provided me a lot of the freedom to try it, and he's never discouraged me from doing any of that.
So you got a nickname for him. Tell
Yes.
us about.
Well, it's a nickname that he has pretty much coined, and
He's earned it.
pure no-tiller. See, he has never tilled in his life.
Right.
Not many human beings or farmers can say that.
20 years old. Is he going to be
20
able?
years, no-till.
Is he going to be able to say this when he's 40?
I hope so.
That's up to him.
I really hope so.
So we got the genes straightened out now in the generation.
I have a pure bloodline.
All right. Must be genetic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think what's been most meaningful for me in 25 years is the impact we've had on no-tillers' lives. I mean, person after person has come to me at this conference that said, "Thank you, Frank, for helping me make more money." And that kind of really boils it down to what it is. And that's a real compliment to me, and I appreciate that.
Well, I really like the fact that Frank has put on one of the best meetings that I go to. I only go to one meeting, and that's the National No-Tillage Conference, because of the people that I can meet, and those are people that I can contact all year round. Even if you have different soil types, different part of the country, you still have those names and numbers. You can go call on them and go visit, or even just talk on the phone.
Yeah, there'd have to be, if there was one place you had to go every year. I mean, I attend other meetings as well, but if you could only pick 3 days that you are going to spend somewhere, you make this conference and you're covered for the year. You've got all the information you need. to make it another season farming. It's been an incredible experience. Frank and his team have done, incredible job with all this.
Randall was telling Byron earlier that when we have the 50-year meeting, Byron may be the only one that's still here.
Probably the case, yeah.
Thank you. I enjoy coming, and I'll keep coming as long as I can. I'm a little younger than Frank, not much though. But I look at the breadth and the scope of this meetings, and there are always new ideas, different speakers, and so that I always learn something new, and the subject matter is so varied that you just won't get bored.
It's the best speakers around. I mean, I don't know how Frank does it, but like Alan was saying, it's the best people, the leading, it's the leading edge of what's going on in no-till and many other parts of it. Just agriculture, period.
It's a real team deal with us. Daryl and John and Laura and others get these speakers put together, and it's interesting because for years I'd go home from this conference and I couldn't stand this conference for about 45 days and just sick of having to run it and everything. And then after about 45 days I'd get excited about it and think about speakers we could have.
A real great feature is it allows the average one of us to be with and associate one-on-one a lot of times with the elites, the top knowledges out, people in the field. We have a chance to one-on-one with those people. At most meetings you go to, those people come on stage, do their thing, and they're off and gone. But at this conference, you spend 2-3 days and back and forth with them.
One of the things I'm most proud of this conference, and we started it on year one, is we promoted the fact of networking in the halls, and a lot of them, and I always like to do a panel like we just did, because then people buttonhole you in the halls about this, and it makes it a much better learning experience for everybody. We had somebody that came to the first conference and told me he was never coming back, and I said, well, why? And he said, I thought I was going to get to go to every session, and I found out I had to pick and choose. So he wasn't too happy. And there's another story. A guy called me up one time in August and registered for the conference, and I said to him, well, I don't have the program put together yet, so I appreciate you doing it. And he says, I don't care about the program, which was not good for my ego, but he said to me, look, I know you have a good program, but even if I think you have a rotten program, I'm coming anyway because I've learned the value of networking in the halls.
I thought he was coming to hear your jokes.
No. Hey, Alan brought his parrot once to Indianapolis. Brought his wife and the parrot. And the wife came downstairs, the parrot wasn't very happy, and the parrot spotted Alan in the distance and started squawking like crazy.
And 200 guys were looking up trying to find the bird.
Tell us what it was like in 1993 when you guys first got here together. Unlike most other meetings you've ever been to, how did people react in that first year?
Real quick, I had to start early. I had 150 miles to go, and it was an ice storm, sheet of ice. The first car I came up on, 36, did a complete donut in front of me and went on it about 20 miles an hour for about 140 miles, and I was a nervous wreck. But then I got into the no-till conference and got calmed down, and I knew that, well, this is the place I got to come back to, even if I got to go on a sheet of ice.
I had attended a competitors no-till conference in the same year, and I soon learned that the difference, this was so much more valuable. So my late father didn't like to go anyplace, but he would send me all of these conferences, and I had to give him a report. He concurred too. He says, you just keep going.
Well, I think it's great because when you come here, the networking, talking to people, you hear what they do like, but you also hear what they did not like. What they've tried and didn't work, or somebody was trying to sell something, and they're crazy. That just doesn't work. And it's so challenging. I mean, all the speakers challenge us.
I've seen the time that two guys are talking in the hallway, and one will say to the other, did you just hear that speaker, that crazy idea that he had? That'll never work. And the stranger he's talking to says, I've been doing just that for 8 years.
It's kind of funny how it's evolved. I remember the first conference, it was probably 80% equipment setup and 20% other stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
Now we're switched to, we're probably 80% soil health and 20%, you know, it's amazing, right? It's just evolved into it's still no-till, but just it's moved along with the crowd and how they've you know.
Well, you see on these museum boards, there's a section in here of farm shop invented things, and in the 70s and 80s, people weren't satisfied with equipment on the market, and they were making their own.
Well, the first no-till conference in '93, everything was, what do I put on my row unit? I went to strip till in '96, then strip till got a lot of, everybody just started going to round table meetings. You might have 40. Now it's cover crops, and get there early, you might have 140 people.
Yep.
That's the interest I've seen over the 25 years.
And I've also seen early on, we did a round table on organic no-till. I think there were 7 people in there. A couple years later, we did it, and there were 75.
Yeah.
And the same thing with strip till. I mean, early on, there were some small ones, and some round tables will draw 150 people on strip tilling today. So.
Another thing, there's the other ag media, no-till is much more accepted now.
Right,
back
no doubt.
then it was not accepted very well. Now, every farm magazine talks about basically the benefits of reduced tillage or no-till.
When we do the history book, there's going to be some interesting comments in there on how the majors didn't like no-till.
Well, and I think they still don't look at their advertising.
Right.
They're promoting these big, heavy, $50,000, $75,000 tillage tools and stuff, and blowing a lot of smoke. And well, they don't blow much smoke anymore, but
with the high
burning
horsepower
diesel and stuff. And
but you still read good articles about no-till. But the advertising.
It's taking the short line companies to really come up front and start, the Yetters and the Martins and Dawns and those people.
Great Plains.
Whatever, to start really making things available now to the no-till.
Those people saw a niche in the ag market.
Started moving towards it.
Well, there's a few of us here now, but what I see is a changing of the guard because I don't see as many familiar faces as I used to, and that's okay because I'm guessing in the past it's been like a third first timers.
Right. We've had
it's
that high.
It's growing. It's growing around my community too.
Right.
I had some people that were really thumbs down on it, and they're doing it now. At first I liked listening to them because they were almost giddy about it, like they just found out about the invention of the wheel.